You're listening to Where You Live with Gene Sullivan.
Welcome back to Where You Live. We're broadcasting from the Natural Green Lawn and Landscape Studios and brought to you by the great folks at Extreme Exteriors and American Family Insurance, the Kim Bennett Agency. Before we go on, I'd like to also remind our listeners, we've got a great resource for you. It's a free newsletter. We put it out bi-monthly. It's called Where You Live. A lot of great stuff in it. We also have in there, besides great topics and issues that we deal with each and every issue, we also have a listing of free webinars that we teach at New Concepts in the evening. That's right, in the convenience of your own home. We deal with property rights, what it means to live in a homeowner association. If you're on the board of directors, how to be more efficient and better at your job as a board member, and that and so many more. All you need to do is give us a call during the week at 952-922-2500. Ask for Lori. She'll make sure that you start receiving that subscription either electronically or by mail. Now, we're addressing this opinion piece from a Christine Kornthal that was placed in the Santa Clarita Valley Signal newspaper just about a couple weeks ago. She's concerned about the issue she found out, as some people may be just finding out as well, that, it's not just homeowner associations that have restrictions on what you can and can't do. Cities, any municipality, any place where you live are going to have varying restrictions. It's important if you're going to purchase a home to realize that the due diligence is upon you to take the time to find out what owning a home in that city is all about. What are those requirements? Some are going to have more restrictions in terms of how many dogs you can have. So if you want to have a dog kennel and you want to breed dogs, you may need to be in another municipality than in others. If you're a beekeeper, you may find out that you may need to have a beehive in certain areas, but not in others. You may find out, as she was finding out, that even when it comes to choosing the paint color of the home, there may be more restrictions than you even thought was possible. So take the time to find out. The Latin is caveat emptor. Buyer beware. Buyer, the onus, the responsibilities on your shoulders to find out. And so we're talking about this, and we were talking about how she was surprised at some of the issues. And I said right at the end of our last segment here that I would deal with some of the issues, some of the things that we can do to make a difference. And I think there are some very positive things that a person can do here. I used the Latin caveat emptor because that's important. The thing that I'd like to stress right here about this, about owning a property, becoming a person who enters into the wonderful world of home ownership, of owning real estate, there's two very important laws or principles, rather, dealing with property that I want you to know. These are property law principles that if you're going to own property, you need to know, you need to be aware of, okay? The first one that I mentioned is caveat emptor, the Latin for buyer beware. In other words, you can't feign ignorance. You can't say, I didn't know, I didn't realize. It's not, people want to say in our society, it's not my fault. Boy, how many times do I hear that in a week? Where someone says in a homeowners association, I didn't live here to expect thus and such, or this to be happening. You need to do something about it. No, homeowner, you need to take the time to find out before you purchased into the home whether or not dogs are allowed. You needed to find out before you purchased the home. Are there restrictions on what you can paint the color of your home? Are there restrictions on the fence and the type of fence that you can put in? Is there a regulation on whether or not you can have a side business, that you can work on vehicles? out in the driveway. Not even just homeowner associations, even in the city of Minneapolis. You have a car jacked up and doing some work, and you're doing that and just kind of leaving it in a progressive process here for a week or so while you're working on it. Guess what? You could very well receive a notice, an ordinance violation from the city of Minneapolis. You need to know and understand these things. So first principle, buyer beware. What's the second principle you need to be aware of? And that is the idea that ignorance of the law is no excuse. That's right. Let me say that again. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Do you remember that, folks, when you first began to drive? I certainly do. I remember one of the things that my driving instructor and people said to me, that there were certain speed limits, even though there was no sign that was designated in place, that when you're in a residential area, it's going to be a certain speed, and you have to know what that is. You can't say, well, there was no sign, officer. I didn't know. It's not my fault. He's going to say ignorance of the law is no excuse. Just because you may not have heard of it doesn't mean that you're not responsible for it. Let me say that again. Just because you didn't know something exists does not mean you're not responsible for it. If we're going to be adults, if we're going to live in a world where we are needing to relate to one another, and you want to try and create something that is going to be the most compatible for all, there's going to have to be give and take. That's why there are city ordinances. That's why there are governing documents in a homeowners association. Read and know them. Take the time. That is your responsibility. We like to think about the rights we have with homeownership. We don't like to think about the responsibility. And there is a great deal of responsibility when it comes to home ownership. So let's try and remember that. And for Christine and her husband, I hope they find out that there is a little slice of heaven and a piece of property that works for them in Santa Clarita. One last thing that I want to address is, if you don't like the way something is, you need to remember we live in a wonderful society. We live in a wonderful country. Why? Because it allows us the opportunity to see change. You, instead of being a complainer saying, why is it this way? I shouldn't have, I should have the right to do what I want. No, if there's something in place, an ordinance that you don't like with the city, a rule you don't like with your homeowners association, do you know what? The other thing that you need to remember about home ownership is that you have a responsibility then to become active. Become proactive. Some people might call it being a local activist. Other people will just call it being proactive. Whatever you label it. Folks, you can change something. If a ordinance is in place concerning graffiti, and it got written such that it included children's sidewalk art, and you're concerned about this, and we don't have common sense where people can make a distinction between the two, and you're afraid of that, you can go to your city hall and you can ask to have things changed. That might mean becoming involved. Yes, that might mean taking some of your free time, but guess what? If other people in the city feel the same way that you do, you can start something and get that to affect change. The same thing is something that we tell and encourage people in homeowner associations all the time. There may be a rule that you like. I know of one association that had the rule, no pets. It had been that way for years. But there were a couple people who said, you know what? That was 15, 17 years ago. I think there are a number of us that would like to have pets. And so we helped that homeowner understand what are their rights. And so they ended up putting together a petition. And they got the requisite signatures of, according to the governing documents of their association, that needed 25% of the homeowners to say, yes, let's discuss this in a special meeting. And so they got the signatures, brought it before the board. The board said, wow, yes, let's consider it. They had the special meeting. The board began to hear a lot of homeowners who showed up, and they all were expressing their desire to want to have a pet. Guess what? A couple people that were now on the board said, we agree with that too. And you know what happened? That homeowner association changed their governing documents to say we're now allowing pets. And what a wonderful process to go through. The person wasn't going to just resign themselves to the fact that, woe is me, everything's terrible. They made a significant impact on where they live in their neighborhood. The same thing can happen in a city like Santa Clarita, in a city like Minneapolis, and more. Well, let's take a break right now. When we come back, we've got some things for landlords in Bloomington. You can make a significant impact, and you may need so, on how you own and operate your buildings in the city of Bloomington. More after these messages.